This chapter is everything about understanding lights. You learn how to get from this to this, or something like that to that. You will receive a great feeling of what an impact light on your image has, no matter what kind of camera you use. Perfect lighting is the key to create cinematic images and leveling up your production value even more. You will also learn how to work with variable light only and get the best out of it. If you want to know more about which light you should buy, watch the equipment chapter first, that is covered there. If you have already seen it and are still unsure, I promise you after this chapter you will definitely know what you can achieve with which lights. Good lighting combined with a thoughtful composition, great audio and camera movement is what really separates a beginner from a pro. Lighting a scene or a shot can consume a lot of production time, but it's worth it. In big movie productions they spend very fast a whole day setting up the lights for only one scene. Light is also a very great way to create or increase emotions. What it feels like when you see this. And now? As you see, you learn more and more new tools to influence the viewer's feelings. To briefly reflect until here, there is the focal length, the composition, the angle, the movement, sound and light. You can see the light like it is paint. You can paint your image with light however you like it. Light has different colors, as we saw in the color temperature lesson, but not only the light, also the shadows can be used to design your image. So turn not only randomly lights on, but also remove unwanted lights. Move them around, place them so that it helps to show what you want to tell. After this chapter you know exactly how to use your lights and are able to create the exact mood that you want. What helped me a lot to get better at lighting was looking for inspiration from other movies or pictures and try to recreate some of them. There are 4 essential aspects of light to understand. This is quality of light, quantity of light, direction of light, and color of light. Let's start with the quality of light. This simply means how hard or soft your light is. The bigger and closer the light source in relation to your subject, the softer the light. The smaller and far away the light source from your subject is, the harder the light. Take a look at the sunlight. It's a very hard light and it creates hard shadows, even if the sun is a very big light source, but it's very far away from the subject. Because of that, it's a hard light. You can use a softbox and diffuse the light, but when it is very far away from the subject, it is still a hard light, because the light source in relation to the subject gets smaller. Now what do you mean is the moonlight, a soft or hard light source? Even if it looks soft because it's very dim and not a direct light like the sun, because it's a reflected light. It is the same as you use a reflector with artificial light. Look at the shadows the moonlight creates, they are sharp, which tells you it is a hard light source, because it's still very far away. So a little tip up front, if you at some point want to recreate the moonlight at daytime, that means you should bring your exposure down and change your white balance until the daylight becomes bluish. And here you go, you have created the moonlight at daytime. Mostly it looks better if the sun is in a lower angle compared to midday. This works only because the sun and the moon are both hard light sources. The soft light looks very flattering on people's faces, because the light rubs around the subject and creates a soft transition from light to shadow. It makes a face smoother and balances imperfections. Because of that, it's often used in beauty shots, in commercials and generally often to light women's. There are many ways to create soft light, which we cover in the video about shaping the light in this chapter. But the same thing also happens with the sun when you film in a cloud-covered environment. This diffuses the light, and because the clouds are closer to the subject compared to the sun and have a bigger surface, it will create a much softer light compared to the direct sunlight. Hard light creates hard shadows, which are more defined. You can also see imperfections better on the skin. It's very good to separate subjects or textures. Because of that, it has a more masculine look. For example, if you have to film a bodybuilder, I'm pretty sure he will like hard light better than soft light. Also, to separate the subject from the background, a hard light will create a more noticeable separation effect compared to a soft light. That creates more depth, which we also can create with other factors like foreground, aperture and color, as we already learned. All these factors combined will get you the most possible depth in your image. That doesn't mean that one light is better than the other. Both have their purposes and you can use them also to stylize your image. The accuracy of the light source can also be described as light quality, which is represented as CRI, which stands for Color Rendering Index. 0 is very inaccurate and 100 is accurate like the light from fire or the sun. Most of today's LED technology lights offers a CRI value from 95 to 97, which is very great. Every light contains a different number of colors, also the sunlight. With this measurement method, you can see the quality of artificial light compared to natural light. So with cheaper LED lights, it can happen that you get a magenta or a green tint in it. Some of them are also warmer or cooler than others. It's important to understand that LED lights will change their temperature slightly over time. So if accuracy is very important to you, you should have a measuring tool like the Sekonic C800 and some gels to correct for the difference between the lights. We create very soon another video that describes the whole measurement process very well, which you will find also in this chapter. That brings us to the next point, which is quantity. This describes how much light you have to work with. Enough light is the better case than no light at all. Then when you have no light, you have to raise your ISO value, which gives you very fast and noisy image. But I give you here also very useful tips to handle such situations later in this chapter. Also, the power of the light source can be important depending on what you want to do with it. That also doesn't mean you should buy a ton of lights. It's also possible to create with only one light a fantastic shot. Also, too much light doesn't always look good. It can be too harsh, especially during midday when the sunlight comes directly from the top. Such situations you can control only by using an ND filter, shooting in the shadow, using an additional artificial light to fight against the sun, or with diffusion, especially when you work with the sunlight. Artificial light has the advantage that it can be controlled, each light on its own. This way you have more possibilities to create your wanted look, instead of only using settings like the ISO value, which brightens up every light equally in the shot. There are also circumstances where you can get too much light, especially while shooting slow motion. Quantity of light also means the bright spots in an image automatically attract attention. Therefore, too bright spots away from the main subjects are not always the best idea. They can distract from the main subject, but this is also a guideline and not something that has to be that way all the time. The next point is the light direction. The placement of the light influences the look of the picture. The slightest changes in the position of the light can create a totally different look. Frontal placed light makes the subject very flat and creates less depth in the image. But because it is flat, it creates nearly no shadows. It gets often used in beauty commercials to reduce every shadow and imperfection of a skin. But if you place a light more to the side, you get way more depth and an overall more three-dimensional looking image. A big secret in film production that is not consciously noticed by many people when they look at the movie is that the camera is mainly placed on the shadow side, also called the far side or negative side. Compare the following shots by yourself. Here the camera is on the same side as the light comes from, and here we are on the shadow side, which looks more interesting to you. The same works with objects. The image looks way more interesting. This is also the reason why you should shoot outdoors against the sun instead of with the sun. This effect doesn't have to be always very strong. You can also make it more subtle if you don't go for a too dramatic look, but still want more depth in your image. The same technique to light can be used while filming 2 or more persons. But not all shadows look good. This is more a creepy look that can be used to show a psychopath or a villain, so place the light to your advantage. The last point is the color of the light. Each light type has a different color or temperature. The sun looks not the same as fire. Your camera's color temperature can be calibrated to the same temperature, so the exact light you're looking at appears white. But as you know, sometimes you don't want that. By combining 2 different light colors or temperatures, you will get a stronger color contrast in your image and your subject will stand out more. In this example, the background is lit by 3200K and the frontal light is daylight around 5600K, which creates the orange and teal look. This is strong color contrast because when you look at the color wheel, these 2 colors are on the opposite side, which creates the most noticeable effect. The same works with all other opposite colors. You can also use colored light like RGB LED lights to create color contrast in your image, which you see a lot in music videos. If you go for too close colors like blue and green, the color contrast isn't that big anymore, so try to use two colors on the opposite side of the wheel to light the scene. Color can also mess up your shots, especially colors from reflected surfaces like green grass or colored walls. The light that gets reflected from these surfaces create the same color on your subject. The only thing to avoid this is to change the location or cover these surfaces with black or white material. Otherwise it can be mostly fixed in the post. If you learned something, subscribe to the channel. And if you want to learn even more, check out the All-in Filmmaker course. Link is in the description. And now let's create.